So even as this conversation about a possible Kurdish front against Iran, this conversation increases and intensifies, history actually explains why Kurdish groups remain deeply cautious, apprehensive, and even suspicious about the intentions of Washington, D.C. Because this relationship has long been marked by strategic cooperation and repeated disappointment. Take, for example, 1988. Saddam Hussein carried out a chemical attack, gassing thousands of Kurdish people. Just a few years later, 1991, the first Gulf War, United States actually encouraged the Kurdish groups to rise against Saddam Hussein's regime. March 1991, Saddam Hussein's forces in Iraq, they brutally crushed the Kurdish uprising, and they expected, if the Kurdish groups expected that the Americans would come as the knight in shining armor, that really didn't happen. It was only in April 1991 did the US and allies step in, but established a no-fly zone in northern Iraq to protect the Kurdish population. Then again, let's talk about the second Gulf War, 2003. The Kurdish Peshmerga fighters, they fought alongside the US forces during the invasion of Iraq, and they played a very critical role. You know, when the forces were marching from the north towards Baghdad, these forces played a very critical role in toppling Saddam Hussein. But despite expectations, that independent Kurdish state did not emerge. Kurdish regions remain a part of Iraq, a part of Iran, a part of Syria, and a part of Turkey. History explains why many Kurdish leaders remain very apprehensive. They may be used yet again and abandoned. I want to bring into this conversation Brigadier General Reservist Yossi Kapawasa. He's heading the Jerusalem Institute of Strategy and Security, joining us on this special broadcast. Also with me is Daniel Silverberg, former Pentagon and Capitol Hill official. Gentlemen, welcome. Great to have you back. Brigadier General Kapawasa, reports indicate that Kurdish groups have been used and abandoned by the US in the past against Saddam Hussein in Iraq. 1991, 2003, reports also indicate President Trump spoke to some of these groups and leaders. Will this work this time? How do you read this?
Well, I think the Kurds are part of the Iranian opposition. The Kurdish factions that are located in Iraq are part of the Iranian opposition, and they share the burden of removing the Islamic Republic from power, and replacing it with a government that would care about the people of Iran and try to make their life better. And what they have in mind is to have more autonomous power for the Kurds in Iran. They know that the rest of the opposition is very sensitive to the idea that they would like to have a separatist attitude towards what needs to happen in the future. They are aware of that, and I think they are cautious not to cause any trouble in this respect. But unlike many other groups, they are able, if they are being given the necessary equipment and ammunition, they are able to conduct some military operations in the areas of their concern, and that's something that the Iranian government is very worried about. They took all kinds of precautionary steps to face such an attack, and the rest of the Iranian opposition is following it very closely to make sure that there's no separatism, because they are very concerned about that too.
Because if the aim is to target the regime from within and use the people, there is some conversation that you use the Kurdish people in the north, you use the Baluch people in the Sistan, Baluchistan region. There are other ethnic groups. And then from different flanks, the periphery attacks the core. Is that more wishful thinking in your appreciation, sir?
It's hard to say, but I think the major burden lies on the shoulders of the Farsi part of the population, the people of Tehran. In order to topple the regime, you need to cause some demonstrations and to see the people of Tehran take to the streets and remove the power, remove the existing regime from power. That has to happen, and what we are all telling them is that they should be prepared and ready for that when the time is ripe. And for the time being, what we are doing, we are working on weakening the regime and weakening the security apparatuses of the regime so that eventually the time will be ripe for the people to go out to the streets. Not only in Tehran, but all over Iran, including in other places, in Balochistan, in Kurdistan, in whatever.
That's a very important point you're making, that you're waiting for the right opportunity, waiting for the right time for the Farsi people, the Persians of Iran to rise, and not just the Kurds in Kurdistan or the Baluchis in Sistan, Balochistan to rise from the periphery. The core has to explode. Daniel Silverberg, 6 days into this operation, or almost a week into this operation, do you see that happen? Do you see the regime weakened enough for the people to rise either in the periphery or the core? Or do you still see the regime very firmly entrenched despite Ayatollah Ali Khamenei being decapitated? Because within Iran, they're saying there'll be a new Ayatollah in place. The systems are still working and strongly.
Gaurav, it's good to be with you again. Thanks for having me. I have to say the pronouncements coming out of Iran remind me of the Baghdad leadership's grand pronouncements in 2003. A lot of bluster and not a lot of reality there. This is unquestionably a system right now under tremendous strain. Clearly, some decision-making capability is still in place. They're able to determine what targets to hit. They just went after an Amazon data center facility yesterday that showed that someone is clearly making targeting decisions. But to say that the regime, everything is fine, business as usual, obviously there's a fair amount of bluster there. The signals that I'm looking for of where this goes from here and whether the regime will crack is, are we going to be hearing from people inside the security apparatus communicating to the US, some even publicly saying there is an alternative here? We're not seeing those just yet, so I think it's going to be a little bit of time before this regime truly cracks.
Would you want to hazard a guess on the timeline, an informed opinion, considering multiple waves of airstrikes and missile strikes have been carried out on Iran, wave after wave, and America is officially saying 90% of the Iranian missile strike capabilities have been taken out, 86% of their drone strike capabilities have been taken down. How long before they're no longer either an air power, missile power, or even a naval power?
I'm pleased you asked the question that way, because you really have to assess military sector by sector, capability by capability. Unquestionably, Iran is going to be able to harass its neighbors and harass Israel through low-tech drones, through low-level missile capabilities. But clearly, its ballistic missile capabilities has been seriously degraded. I saw a statistic upwards of 80 to 90%. And what people don't realize is Iran wasn't posing just a nuclear threat. The ballistic missile capability was a tremendous regional threat that likely motivated President Trump to want to take action here. So I think the missile threat is degraded. Clearly, the naval threat is degraded. But Iran still maintains any number of asymmetric capabilities that could have devastating global impacts. One, they're showing it in the Strait of Hormuz. If you can't get shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, all countries are going to feel that hurt. Two, don't discount that with Iran's regime up against the wall, they could deploy their asymmetric tools, namely terrorism. There are any number of soft targets throughout the Middle East, Europe, Africa, US embassies, synagogues, what have you, that Iran could target.
True. Brigadier Kapawasa, regime change from the air, just like airstrikes, may just be a pipe dream. In your considered opinion, will Israel and the United States have to consider putting boots on ground? Because many in Iran are indicating they're keeping their powder dry for ground operations. Perhaps draw the Americans and the Israelis in, like in Iraq, and then let it be a long-drawn affair.
Well, I don't think there are going to be American or Israeli, definitely not Israeli, boots on the ground in Iran. What we have put forward as a goal of this war is, one, to deprive Iran from its capabilities, and secondly, to create the conditions that would enable the people of Iran to take control of Iran. We never said that we are going to make the regime change by ourselves and by putting troops in harm's way in Iran itself. That is not in the cards in my mind. This is why
Okay.
this is going to take a longer time than it would have if we did put troops in this place. And that's why the President Trump said it's going to take something like 4 to 5 weeks. And there's actually no time limit. It will take as long as it takes. But eventually we
No
should get
time limit,
regime in
as
Iran.
long as it takes. So tire the Iranians out, the siege perhaps, like in the medieval times. Daniel, the last 30 seconds I have on this part of the show, do you look at it as a siege around the capital and then tire the adversary out, make sure he runs out of food, water, ammunition, and then surrender, metaphorically speaking?
General Kupperwasser is one of the best analysts out there on this. I might quibble with one point, though, which is I don't think time is unlimited here. The president might be saying 4 to 6 weeks right now. There is a political time clock on this, and he is at a certain point going to start hearing from his own party saying, all right, let's get back to the US economy here, enough focusing on Iran, even though most Republicans right now fundamentally support this mission. I'm personally also concerned about a strategy of trying to exacerbate sectoral infighting inside Iran, sending Iranian Kurds in rather than trying to dislodge the regime through an air campaign. But I think we will know a lot more in the next 5 days.
The next 1 week, very crucial. As always, Daniel Silverberg and Brigadier General Kupperwasser, such a treat talking to the two of you and getting your insights in the manner in which this conflict is spreading.